It's amazing, isn't it? The work that community-based organizations do, the impact they have right there on the ground. But it always makes you think, how do they actually make sure every dollar, every volunteer hour really makes a difference? How do they make it all work on the financial side?
It is, you hit the nail on the head, sustainability. I mean, without good financial management, even the CBOs with the best intentions can really struggle to do what they set out to do.
Absolutely. And that is exactly what we're going to dive into today. We've got this training manual from the Southern Africa Litigation Centre, SALC, and it really lays out the roles of the board and the director in making sure a CBO is financially healthy. Think of it as your guide to understanding how these really important organizations can build a strong financial structure.
Yes, exactly. Our mission is to pull out the most practical, actionable advice from this SALC manual, so anyone who's involved with CBOs or just curious about them can understand how they use the resources wisely.
Okay, so the SALC manual starts off by being really clear about one thing. Good financial health in a CBO doesn't just happen. It's a shared responsibility.
Exactly. You've got the executive director, the CEO, the person running things day to day. Obviously, they are very involved in the financial side of things.
Right, they're in the trenches, making sure everything runs smoothly. But then you have the board, the trustees or directors, and they're more about the overall strategy and financial direction, right?
Yes. And it's interesting how the SALC manual emphasizes this need for the board to be independent. Their decisions need to be unbiased, putting the organization's interests first. That's their fiduciary duty.
Fiduciary duty. It sounds a bit formal, but it's really about taking good care of the CBO's resources, right? It's like being entrusted with something really valuable. And the manual also mentions managing conflicts of interest.
Right. Board members need to be open about any situation where their personal interests might clash with those of the CBO, and there should be clear processes for dealing with those. It's all about trust and integrity.
Absolutely. Now, here's something from the SALC manual that might surprise some people. The financial knowledge of the board members themselves. It's not just enough for the director to be good with numbers.
That's a key takeaway. In a perfect world, the board would have people with business or finance experience. But even if that's not possible, the manual stresses that every board member should have a basic level of financial literacy.
Okay. So at a minimum, what should every board member be able to do when it comes to finances?
The SIC manual says all board members should understand basic financial terms, be able to read financial statements, even if it's just a summary, and really important, they need to know what questions to ask to assess the organization's financial situation.
Asking the right questions is so important. It's not about becoming an accountant overnight. It's about being able to spot potential issues. The manual also talks about how the board can organize its financial oversight, like having a treasurer or an audit committee.
Exactly. Some CBOs have a designated treasurer from the board, someone who leads on financial matters. Others might set up a smaller audit committee with a few board members who have the right skills to really focus on oversight.
Okay, so who are these financial sense checkers, so to speak? What exactly are the main responsibilities of this treasurer or audit committee, according to the SALC manual?
Well, the manual highlights several key duties. They have to make sure the CBO's financial reports are accurate and complete, that the internal controls and risk management are working, and that the organization is following all the rules and regulations. Think of them as the board's financial watchdogs.
Got it. What else do they handle?
Well, they're also responsible for choosing external auditors and making sure they are qualified and independent.
Yeah.
And if the CBO does any internal audits, the treasurer or audit committee would usually coordinate those too.
That sounds like a really important role. What do they need to be effective?
The SALC manual says they need the right information and they need it on time. For example, they need to be able to track how the CBO's money is being spent compared to the budget. The manual actually suggests that the treasurer should be able to see details of both revenue and expenses, so they get the complete picture.
Makes sense. You can't oversee something if you don't have the information. The manual also mentions that the treasurer should get those management accounts before the board meetings. Why is that so important?
It gives them time to go over the financials before the meeting, spot anything that might be a concern, and basically come to the meeting prepared. That way they can have a much more focused and informed discussion.
Right. So now let's talk about the whole board. What are their big picture financial tasks every year, according to the SALC manual?
Well, at the top of the list is approving the CBO's budget for the year. It's the financial plan that guides everything the CBO does.
That's a big one. Anything else on the financial to-do list for the board each year?
Yes. Making sure there's a clear separation of duties when it comes to finances. That helps to minimize the risk of errors or even fraud. They also decide who can sign off on financial transactions. And they set up good governance policies and review those regularly. Finally, they set the compensation for the executive director and other senior staff.
So it's not just about approving things, it's about creating a culture of accountability.
Yeah.
What about more regular check-ins? What does the board do every quarter?
The SALC manual recommends that the board really digs into the financial statements every quarter. They compare the actual income and expenses to what was in the budget. They need to make sure the CBO is financially on track, and if there are any significant differences, they need to understand why.
Makes sense. Catching problems early can save a lot of trouble later on. What else are they looking at each quarter?
Cash flow. They need to make sure the organization has enough cash to cover day-to-day expenses. And they keep an eye on the reserve funds, which are so important for dealing with unexpected challenges.
Right. So the board sets the overall financial direction and keeps tabs on things regularly. Now let's talk about the executive director's role. How are they involved, according to the SALC manual?
Well, the executive director is responsible for understanding the financial information, interpreting it, and acting on it. It's also their job to make sure those internal controls are working properly and that the finance team, as well as other managers, are doing what they need to do to maintain good financial practices.
So they're the link between the board's oversight and the day-to-day work. What specific financial tasks does the SALC manual mention for the ED?
Quite a few. The manual highlights monitoring the CBO's financial performance and processes, reviewing and approving financial statements and any big transactions, and leading the development of the annual budget from the management side.
So they're really steering the ship when it comes to daily finances.
Yeah.
What about communication with the finance team and the board?
Communication is key. The executive director should have regular meetings with the chief financial officer or whoever's in charge of finances to get updates and talk about financial planning. They also work closely with the audit or finance committee of the board to discuss financial matters in detail.
Makes sense. Keeping those lines of communication open is so important. Now, the ED is also involved in presenting financial information to the board, right?
Absolutely. Usually, they'll present the financial reports with the CFO, giving the board a clear understanding of the organization's financial position. They also play a big part in meeting with the external auditors to go over their findings and recommendations.
Right, so the ED really needs to understand the finances and be able to explain them to everyone involved. Now, let's talk about those internal controls. How does the executive director make sure those are working properly, according to the SALC manual?
It's all about taking practical steps. The manual highlights things like regularly checking that financial procedures are being followed, making sure financial documents have the proper approvals and documentation, and having regular conversations with the CFO and other managers about how well those controls are working.
So it's about creating that culture where everyone is responsible for good financial management. It's not just the finance team's job.
Exactly. The executive director needs to make sure all staff know what their responsibilities are when it comes to financial controls. It's a team effort.
Now, the SALC manual also emphasizes the importance of regular meetings that are specifically about financial management. What happens in those meetings?
Those meetings are a chance to discuss the latest financial results and compare them to the budget. They also talk about things that might impact future budgets. It's about staying ahead of the game.
Being proactive.
Exactly. And the manual also encourages them to have more informal, day-to-day conversations about any financial questions or concerns. And something really important. They talk about the need to get approval from funders before making big changes to the budget. Also, the ED should meet with individual program managers regularly to discuss their budgets and spending.
It's a combination of formal and informal communication that keeps things running smoothly. Now, what about some of those day-to-day tasks? What kind of things should the director be doing each month, according to the SALC manual?
The manual gives a really helpful list. It includes things like reviewing bank statements online to check for anything unusual, looking over the full monthly financial statements, and this is important, analyzing those budget versus actual reports for each program and for the whole organization.
Comparing the budget to what's actually being spent sounds like a really useful tool for staying on track.
Right.
What else is on that monthly to-do list?
Looking at the costs of each program and seeing if those costs match the results they're achieving. Are they getting the most out of their spending? They also review credit card statements to make sure they're being used appropriately and approve any big purchases, checking that there's a good reason and all the paperwork is in order.
These are all really practical steps. Now, what about things that happen less often? What should the director be doing every quarter and every year on the financial side, according to the manual?
Okay. Every quarter, a key task is to go through the materials for the board meeting in advance, paying close attention to the financials. They also discuss the financial results and any risks they see with the board treasurer or audit committee.
Again, that link between management and the board. What about annually?
Annually, the director has a crucial role in developing the organization's budget for the next year. They also carefully review the audit report and talk about it with the external auditor. And finally, the manual suggests they review human resources and financial policies every year to make sure they're still relevant and effective for the organization.
So many layers of financial oversight happening, from daily tasks to annual reviews, and both the board and the director have important roles to play.
Absolutely. The Southern Africa Litigation Center's training manual makes it so clear. Effective financial management in CBOs relies on this shared responsibility. You've got the board, making sure things are running strategically and financially, and the executive director actively involved in the day-to-day. And it's all underpinned by a good understanding of finances, open communication, and everyone working together to fulfill the CBO's mission.
It all goes back to that question we started with. How do CBOs ensure they're using their resources in the best way possible? It's by having this comprehensive approach with everyone knowing their roles and responsibilities, just like the SALC manual lays out.
Precisely. The insights in that manual are so valuable for any CBO that wants to have a strong financial foundation.
So, thinking about all these layers of financial oversight that we've discussed, what's one thing you think a CBO could do right now to improve its financial health and make sure it can keep doing its work in the community? It's a great question to think about.
It is. It's something every CBO should consider.